Hi, my name is Håvard Christensen, and welcome to this talk, From Textbook to Room Scale in 1 month. So, a little bit about my background. I started learning graphics programming to code demos for the demo scene. And then I studied game programming and co-founded a game development studio after graduating. Then, as all young indie game developers do, I ran out of money. And Android programming came to the rescue. Luckily, I get to do Unity projects as well. I'm also especially fond of game jamming as a quick prototype tool. So, I work at a Norwegian digital agency called Agens. And we have grown making money on delivering mobile applications to large Norwegian brands. But the company was originally a games company, and we've always had a part of the company creating games. Our current game project is a skating game called Skate City. But what I'm here to talk about is a small-scale project that we got the chance to do in collaboration with the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, protein synthesis in VR. So, what can you expect from this talk? I have 3 main topics that I want to touch upon. First, a description of the project that we did, and the background for getting the project going. Then, the design and development process we used. And last but not least, the most important part, what would we do differently the next time around? Or what we see as especially interesting ways to create affordable VR experiments for educations or other fields. So, the reason we got this project runs back to an off-chance conversation that I had with a friend at a TEDx event in Oslo. I was being overly enthusiastic about how amazing VR would be for letting students explore anything from the grand universe to the tiniest atom, and describing how cheap all this fantastic technology had become. And yes, the equipment to run everything is still quite expensive, but there is something amazing in the fact that you can basically drag and drop a 3D model and suddenly walk around in that environment with practically no development expertise nor time needed. So, what were the constraints of the project? They were quite clear, both given the application our grant was based upon and the budget our grant allowed us. It allowed us to allocate roughly 1 man-month to work full-time on the project. And the core idea was to let students do the actual kinetic motions of assembling a protein. For this to make sense, I'll give a quick and dirty rundown of what makes us tick, like at the most low level. So, here's the assembly language of the cell. We all know the famous DNA helix. So if you split that DNA, we get something called RNA, and we attach this RNA to the ribosome. Then the ribosome reads incoming transport RNA, seen up here, and it only accepts the one that matches the code. So for every correct transport RNA, the amino acid on top of the transport RNA gets added to a chain. And after a while, there's a special code that says stop the party, and voila, the chain of amino acids folds into a protein. So, let me share a bit about our process. We chose to spend 2 days of pre-production by having a workshop. And the first and most crucial step was to get a primer on the science. If we created something that didn't match the science, the project would be an embarrassment to all parties involved. So also before the workshop started, we knew that at the end goal of these 2 days would be to decide what our first iteration should contain. Then we had ourselves a post-it note party, and we decided to divide our notes into different sections, like world, space, interactivity, models, and objects. And this was a nice way to make the problem space more concrete. Up front, we also had to decide which days to do our testing. And these playtesting dates became our pivot point for deciding what to do next. It was a very natural fit, as playtesting allowed for a natural meeting point for all involved parties. So our approach was to use pre and post questionnaires and informal interviews, conversations with students to gain insights of what worked and what didn't. It was brought up during the workshop that these testing days would eat production time, but we wisely decided to set aside one day in the week for testing. So, here is what we built and what we figured out. So, our first iteration focused on getting the simulation engine of the protein synthesis up and running. We wanted people to be able to grab amino acids, attach them to the transport RNA, and attach this to the ribosome. And furthermore, we wanted the main mechanic of right-wrong amino acid to work. In effect, to only accept the correct combinations. So for this iteration, we did not write what amino acid was needed anywhere in the world. So the student had to actually look at the RNA code to decrypt what kind of amino acid was correct. And this turned out to be something that not even molecular biologists knew by heart. So fellow students would aid by using lookup tables to guide the active player that was in VR. Also, this first iteration was very important to actually check that we had understood the science behind the task. When it came to the questions that we used in the pre and post, it was important to try and ask the right questions. In the pre, before they tried the iteration, we mostly quizzed the students about the science related to intricate details of the RNA translation process. Here's some examples. What is special about the code sequence AGG? Or can you shortly describe how the small ribosome unit attaches to the mRNA? And in the post, we asked more directly about what they experienced in the VR and their input on the direction forward. Like what they would prefer we do when we were replacing the box graphics with something more polished, and some uncomfortable questions like, did anything make less sense about this process after you tried it in VR? And we were keeping our fingers crossed that it didn't. For the second iteration, we focused on adding more depth to the simulation by adding attachment of the ribosome to the messenger RNA. And it turned out that this thing was the thing that the students struggled the most with remembering. It was also the point where we had most interaction problems. The task was to attach the small ribosome to a specific spot on the messenger RNA. And we wanted the students to recollect and remember, so we did not highlight the exact point, but used indirect methods to communicate the attachment site. On the third iteration, we used a scientific software called Chimera to render ball models of the ribosome and transport RNA. And the decision to go for a scientific rendering instead of a more abstracted look was taken based on feedback from the students and playtests. And for the fourth iteration, and really this was the final iteration of the project, we introduced a virtual agent to guide the player inside VR. So prior to this, all instructions were given by us in person, and the game only contained the simulation and the interactions. So here's a short video of that.
Been forced to hire you as a substitute. Don't worry, the job is simple. All you have to do is build proteins, the building blocks of life. Simple, really. Let's get started. Good, now attach it to the tRNA. Perfect. You have done an astonishing job so far. A slow and steady, but astonishing job. For that, I would like to award you with something to speed up the process. Here is your tRNA super extravagant blaster gun. It will allow you to shoot random tRNA.
Yes, so we also added a gun so that the students could shoot tRNA. And it wasn't just because it's fun to shoot tRNA, but we wanted them to understand that in the cell, this is a random process. So tRNA just keeps banging into the ribosome, and if the right one comes, it attaches. So we also spent one extra day doing a graphics overhaul. But whilst it was fun to write the script for the robot and give the experience some character and humor, this leads me to the final section, which is the lessons learned. So during our design workshop, we were so concerned with the product that we failed to raise the question about which space the solution will be used. And by space, I mean which space in the real world will the application be used? Will it be used at home, solitary by a single student, in a classroom, with fellow students and a teacher, or student and teacher together privately? But by defining that constraint early, I believe we could have seen different solutions and had a better informed battle plan for how to attack the project. So our interaction with the player inside the experience was, for our first 3 iterations, a necessity. Then we tried to replace it with a virtual agent, and suddenly, without realizing it, we made the mistake of not utilizing our biggest asset, which was the teacher, illustrated with this guy. So scripting a robot to deliver a fun scenario and engaging learning experience makes a lot of sense if we're creating a product that is being delivered individually to each user. In the future, this sort of software will be vital to deliver great educations to millions. However, getting a virtual agent to teach efficiently is a hard problem to solve. So our project would have gained from realizing this, and from the start identified that we would operate in something more like an asynchronous multiplayer. That is, one person immersed in VR needs participation from people outside this world to help solve problems in VR. A great example of this can be found in the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Another issue was that when introducing the robot, we quickly reshaped the discussion about what to do. The design always had to take into account the scenario and scripted events and of the virtual agent, instead of focusing on solving pain points in the interaction model. And discussion often centered around how can we use the virtual agent as a tool to help the player understand. So to round this up, point 1, keep talking passionate about VR with people at multidisciplinary events, such as TEDx and similar. It's a great incubator for new projects and collaborations. Secondly, the weekly iterations on playtesting and design meetings worked very well, and access to students for playtesting was great. And thirdly, we believe that adding scripted scenarios and virtual agents to be the wrong path to take if the goal is to create a cost-effective classroom-oriented teaching experience. So thank you for your attention, and if you wish to talk with me, I'll be around, and there's my Twitter handle and my email. So yeah, thank you.